Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be making the start in just a few moments. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Domestic Electrician webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to introduce you to some of the high-level content within this qualification. So thank you all for joining us on the hottest day of the year, and we hope you find the session helpful. I'm David Pye, Technical Advisor for BSc. I'm joined by Peter Tanner, Lead Examiner, and some other colleagues who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. We're presenting this webinar from home, so please excuse any unwanted background noise or delays in the slides, which can happen occasionally. To engage with the webinar, please type your questions in the Questions tab. We'll also use the chat function to drop any links as we go, such as contact details for Hodder Education. The main presentation is likely to take around 20 to 30 minutes, which will allow at least 15 minutes to answer any questions which may follow after the slides. A couple of hours following the webinar, attendees will receive an email direct from GoToWebinar, including a link to the attendance certificate and a recording of the session. A copy of the presentation can be downloaded from the handout section on your panel now. Please see if you have access and let us know in the questions or chat tabs. We have a survey built into GoToWebinar, which should come up at the end of the presentation and also be included in a link on the follow-up. So let's have a look at the agenda slide. So we've done the welcome. I'll continue with the introductions in a moment. We'll then cover just some general updates, then get into the meat of the content with the domestic electrician. We'll then hand you over for an update on the AM2, cover some support materials, and then answer all of your questions before closing. So here are your presenters. Along with Peter Tanner, we have Salim Visram, Lead Industry Manager for BSc. Myself, I'm Rob Malander, Technical Advisors for BSc. And our guest, Bill Lockyer, Quality and Verification Manager at Net Services. So just some general updates, really, just as a warm-up to what we're going to go through. And the points are really that a lot of our content within Electrical and BSc is covered within quarterly newsletters. There will be further information on the Domestic Electrician Apprenticeship in the summer version due next month. So if you don't know where these are, there is a link on this slide. And if you go into Building Services Industry, they're kept under Key Documents. So if you're not too sure where to look for those, they'll be under Key Documents. Okay, well, now we'll get into the Domestic Electrician Apprenticeship, and I'll pass you over to my colleague, Salim, who'll take you through the following slides. Thank you, Salim.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, and welcome everyone to today's Domestic Electrician Apprenticeship webinar. I'm just going to spend a few minutes on the next few slides, well, at least on the next slide, just giving you a little bit of purpose and background around why this apprenticeship standard has been made available and will be made available as a qualification to basically our channel partners. So the domestic electrical market now effectively has a formal funded training structure following the approval of the new Domestic Electrician Level 3 apprenticeship standard, and this will be for apprentices only. So just a little bit of context. As you can imagine, the industry has been going through a number of changes over the past few years, and there's been more emphasis towards, I guess, the Internet of Things and the concurrent demand for those with electrotechnical expertise to support the increasing technological demands within the domestic environment. Alongside this, there have been a number of surveys to show that the electrotechnical sector suffers one of the highest skill shortages when recruiting trade skills, 42%, which is higher than any other skills sector. Added to this, TESP also produced a report to show that even at the fairly low projected industry growth rates, 10,000 new electricians and 5,000 new apprentices will be needed in addition to replacing the current retirees. Based on the labour market intelligence within that TESP report, they estimated that at least half of these new recruits will be working in the domestic sector. So you can see from there, one of the real reasons why this particular standard had to be created. So this role basically is for people who wish to work within the electrotechnical field, but who do not initially wish to work on construction sites or new builds as fully qualified industrial or commercial electricians. The candidates basically complete the domestic electrician apprenticeship would work in a domestic setting only, installing connected home devices and a vast range of comfort and convenience devices, as well as the wiring that goes alongside those domestic services. I guess what we need to also re-emphasize here is that this development does not in any attempt look to undermine or challenge the established electrotechnical standard, the 5357, and the employer group were very keen that there should be a clear progression route and bridging opportunities for those wishing to transition from a domestic setting, a domestic context, to a full industrial competence. And we'll talk a little bit about RPO and a little about exemption a little bit later on in the slides. So that I guess gives you a little bit of context. And just the chair of the group, Neil Moran, you can obviously see that he's basically saying for the first time the role and scope of a domestic electrician has been precisely defined to give the role a funded formal training pathway and clearly demarcate this occupation from the installation electrician standard. So, there is a fundamental occupational role that the employer group have created to clearly, I guess, define the two standards that will be live come September. So I hope that gives you a little bit more purpose and background in terms of the why and to why this domestic electrician has now been brought about. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives you a little bit of context in terms of it now being approved and is on the Institute's website. So you can see there's a funding band of 15,000. There is also a link to the Institute's website as well. And you can see that NET will obviously be delivering the endpoint assessment for this, which Bill will be talking a little bit more in detail a little bit further along. And you can see, just to reiterate what I mentioned on the previous slide around the duration, this standard is 36 months. Next slide, please. So yeah, so again, this slide is just, again, a snip from where we are in terms of guided learning hours and total qualification time. So you can see there is a GLH of 650 and a TQT of 743. The qualification title, this is a mandated qualification that learners will need to complete prior to getting to Gateway, and they will need to do this qualification in order to complete their endpoint assessment. And the snip below just gives you a little bit of a flavor, and Peter will be talking about this in a little bit more detail around the assessment methodology related to all of the units contained within. So there'll be some online tests, some short answer papers. There will be some assignments as well as practical observations. We're also creating 2 complexes. So the full route for apprentices only will be 5393-03, and there will be a unit route for learners who wish to RPL their previous technical certificates and complete and join an apprenticeship standard. Again, more details around that will be communicated to you in the near future. Next slide, please. So this is a very quick summary of the units contained within the new qualification. So on the left-hand side, you've got all of the knowledge units, and on the right-hand side, you've got all of the on-site performance units. Peter will be talking to you a little bit more in detail around these, but you know, you'll all be familiar with the look and feel of these units. Obviously, you know, there was and there has been some degree of overlap between 5357 and this new 5393 qualification, and that's something that we will talk about in a little bit more detail over the course of the next slide. But I'm not going to read all of the unit titles there, but you could see, you know, you've got health and safety, you've obviously got scientific principles, you've got the 18th edition amendment 2 in there, as well as some inspection and testing and the apply performance units as well. So I think I've spoken a little bit longer than I should have done, but so now I'm going to hand over to Peter, who's going to walk you through the next few slides around these particular units and the assessment methodology to assess them. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Salim, and good afternoon, everyone. Just going to wait for David to move on to the next slide. So as Salim mentioned, the look and feel of this qualification is very similar in structure to 5357. Obviously there's going to be some movement between qualifications. People want to become fully electricians, perhaps after doing a domestic electrician qualification or the apprenticeship. So we felt it best to keep very similar unit numbers and assessment titles and assessment numbers, because it's what you're familiar with 5357. So there's a very similar structure and feel there. You can see from the first slide that we're seeing here that you've got unit 101 and 001, which is your health and safety knowledge units, and the assessment for this will be again very much the same as 5357, because you've got the CSCS card compatibility going on there, so there is very little to change in these assessments. They very much run the same sort of theme as the 5357, but with the domesticated sort of slant to them. And you can see the 102 on-site unit applying health and safety. Again, this is something that is very similar in feel, but instead of general installation work, it's very much tailored to domestic installations. But again, we have agreements, just like with 5357, agreements with the AL that there is a minimum amount of assessments that need to be done on site, and again we have an agreement with the knowledge units as well of what type of assessments are used for these knowledge units. With the on-site, it's just like 5357. I can't speak now. 5357, where there must be at least 2 direct observations on site. Unit 103 is your 103 and 003 is your science and principles. Again, just like 5357, the 003 is your online multiple choice test. Very similar in feel, but some of you will be delighted to know that across the 2 assessments, either the written paper or the online test, there will be no motors, there will be no in-depth 3-phase. Electronic components and electronic equipment has been replaced with newer technologies, and newer technologies such as smart technologies, broadband and Wi-Fi systems, as well as the Internet of Things and smart technologies in homes. So the Science and Principles unit now contains the principles and operation of those devices. Again, they'll be assessed on the online test, and then the short answer written paper, just like 5357. Unit 104, this is a design and install, but what's happened here is with 5357, you've also got the Unit 107, which is your terminations and connections. And what we've done with this is we've actually combined it all together, because it is really one process. When you're installing, you're installing cables, you're terminating cables, and you're doing connections for cables. So it's all been merged together into one unit. So this is why you have in this particular knowledge unit 3 assessments. You've got your 004, which is your online test about the systems and the cables and so on. You've got your 104, which is your design project based around a practical assignment, based around an assignment of a building. And then you've got a 204 practical, which is just like the 5357 107, but this will be obviously built around domestic systems rather than industrial systems. Unit content has new areas such as prosumers technology, which is part 8 of BSM 671. More of an appreciation, but quite a good understanding of the prosumers technology. And of course, electric vehicle charging points with the introduction of that into the part of the building regulations. So we're also including that as part of the design and installation unit. Unit 105 is the planning and overseeing, and this will be assessed by a project-based assessment, and it will share the same scenario as the design unit, but we'll have some project-based questions around that scenario. If we can change slides now, please, David. Unit 106 is your on-site I've got 106. Is your plan and overseeing. Again, this is very similar to the 5357, but very much a domestic theme rather than industrial. And then you've got your Unit 109, which is your combination of the on-site terminations and connections, as well as your on-site design and installation. And so with this 109 on-site unit, I'm sure you're all interested in what the ranges are going to be. To give you an idea, the cables will be on-site assessing 4 from single core cables, multi-core insulated cables. You've got your flat PVC cables. There'll be DC cabling in there, SWA cables, data including power over Ethernet, and then your fire resistant, which won't include MICC cables, but will include FPs. Your systems will be assessing 3 from PVC conduit, PVC trunking, cable basket or cable tray. The points and accessories will be assessing 4 from electric vehicle charging points, fire detection components, data socket outlets, Wi-Fi routers, smart cameras and smart doorbells, smart lighting controls, and other appropriate equipment. There is a full list. And then your connections and terminations will be assessing 4 from single core, multi-core insulated cables, PVC flat profile, DC cabling, SWA cables, data including power over Ethernet, and the fire resistant, but not including MICC. Your Unit 112 and 012 is the understanding of inspection and testing. Again, the skills involved in inspection and testing are not much different, whether you're doing domestic or industrial. So there's a lot of similarities there. But the difference now is going to be that there is also some periodic inspection and testing included into that unit now under the knowledge units. And that will also happen on site as well. So there are some areas of periodic inspection and test that need to be fulfilled. It's by no means a full periodic inspection and test like the qualification 2391, but it's very much an appreciation of that periodic inspection and testing along with initial verification. Your 014 and 114 is your fault finding and rectification. Again, very much similarities there, but aimed and geared towards domestic installations. So again, you'll have your 014, which is your online test, similar to 5357, and then your 114, which is the practical test based on the current rigs. Now, when I'm here talking about the rigs, it's worth mentioning that with these rigs, there will be some subtle changes. I can't give you the full details of what's changing, but there will be some updating, some upgrading of the rigs. Not massive, but equally there'll be some very much similarities. So where you've got like the office currently, that might just be a change of labelling to make that like the main house, or where you've got the boiler room currently, that might just be a change of labelling, and that could end up being something like a swimming pool room. And so there is some very subtle changes that need to be made to suit this qualification. But we're looking at as much as possible the dual purpose changing of labels, but we do need to change a few things for updating. More details on that will come out soon. And then I think there's a final slide that I need to deal with. Yeah, so the 015 is you're applying fault diagnosis and rectification on site. And again, that's very much geared towards dwellings. And then 022, just like the 5357, is going to be the full BS7671 online test, just like the 2382 test. So that's very much a high-level overview of the units and the assessments for this domestic qualification. Now I'm going to hand you over to Bill Lockyer, who's going to talk about the AM2 assessment.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good afternoon, everybody. My name, if you don't know me already, is Bill Lockyer. I'm the Quality and Verification Manager for NET, and this part of the webinar is to do with the Domestic Electrician Standard. And as Salim stated earlier on, it's got an ST number, and you can actually find it on the IFATE website. Next slide, please. So, why is NET the Endpoint Assessment Organisation? Well, NET is a regulated endpoint assessment organisation, and to provide a consistent approach for the electrotechnical industry, the Domestic Electrician Employer Group requested a modified version of the AM2 to form the apprenticeship endpoint assessment. Now, NET have been administering the AM2 since it was transferred as an asset by the government after the reforms back in 1980s, where the industry training boards were basically abolished, and that the time served apprenticeship moved over to a competency based assessment. So the AM2, which was developed back in that time, has been basically looked after by NET since that time, and was basically the standard that the government used as a basis for the apprenticeship standards within England. So NET is not only an endpoint assessment organisation, but is also a charity for the electrotechnical industry, and so does invest quite a lot of money and expertise back into the electrotechnical industry. The employer group required a standard of domestic electrician to link in with the ECS Gold Card scheme. So NET was really the choice that they took, because we've already got that in place for the AM2. So NET are actually regulated by the Institute of Apprentices and Technical Education, and NET already have a network of assessment centres throughout the United Kingdom, which basically independently provide an assessment mechanism which is quality assured for consistency and compliance within IFATE. Next slide, please. So those of you that are familiar with NET and have already got apprentices moving through the 5357, you know that there is a gateway mechanism to put them onto the system. So the new domestic electrician will be separate from the electrotechnical apprenticeship, but what will be is that the system that they will use will be exactly the same as what is currently being provided for the AM2S. Training providers will need to get in touch with NET, because when this apprenticeship is underway, they will need to have a separate contract for the domestic electrician, because it is separate. This will then enable them to upload to a gateway. So there's no new systems to learn, as it will operate in the same way as the current AM2 AM2S and AM2E series. So the gateway requirements will be taken from the assessment plan, and the key requirements are, as you can see on the slide there, is the qualification, the electrotechnical indwellings, maths and English at level 2, and of course the readiness checklist, which will be slightly updated from the current AM2 and AM2S ones that we have in operation at the moment. So when this gateway has been approved, it can be completed at any AM centre offering the EPA. So that could be anywhere within England, and if Wales and Northern Ireland take this up, then available there as well. Next slide, please. So the assessment, with a variety of circuits and different options that a domestic electrician may encounter, and the width of the apprenticeship standard and the current time frame to carry out this endpoint assessment, looks as though it's going to be over 3 days. The endpoint assessment will be graded as a pass or distinction, but components such as the installation side of things will be graded as a pass or a fail. The IFATE assessment plan template has developed over the years as more apprenticeship standards have been developed in a lot of other vocational areas. So in comparison to the electrotechnical assessment plan, the format is quite different. And for NET and the employer group to cover all aspects of that particular role, it required us to produce 3 assessment methods, which was basically an observation of practical competence, a scenario-based interview, and an online knowledge assessment. Next slide, please. The practical part of the installation, and the first method, is an observation by an assessor and will be a single phase installation where circuits for smart technologies, safety circuits, renewable energy, and EV charging, along with other circuits found in a domestic environment. So there's quite a wide range from what's currently being covered within AM2. The testing side of things will cover the whole installation and associated circuits and will be conducted in line with Guidance Note 3 and the on-site guide. The results and verification of the values taken will be uploaded onto an electronic test certificate system. So whereas before it's manually done on electrical installation certificates that have been produced by NET, there will be an electronic test certificate system where details will need to be inputted. Fault finding will replicate common faults found in a domestic installation, which will then need to be identified, and a means of rectification will need to be stated. So they won't actually physically have to repair them, they will just have to state what the fault is and how it would be rectified. Also included will be condition reporting, where the apprentice will identify various anomalies and conditions, which will then be coded correctly. These will then also appear on a condition report, which, as the installation certificate, will be of an electronic format. Next slide, please. So, as I said, and already mentioned, the results of the inspection and testing will be uploaded to a digital format. Now, that is a big change from where we are at the moment, where it's actually paper-based. The other big change is that we had to cover the behaviours that were stipulated within the assessment plan. So the methodology that we're applying for that will be a scenario-based interview where different questions will be asked around different scenarios that an apprentice is likely to come across through their working day. These will automatically be generated by the NET system, and their responses will be logged by the assessor. So it will be quite random. So it won't be once one or two have been through the system, they know what the scenario questions are. You won't know on the day because they'll be generated within our system randomly. The online examination will be a little bit different as well, because presently it's very much orientated around BS 7671. The online exam for the domestic electrician will contain questions relating to health and safety, BS 7671, building regulations and new and renewable technologies. But again, this will be an open book scenario utilizing BS 7671, Electrician's Guide to Building Regulations, Site Guide and Guidance Note 3. So as I mentioned before, the installation component will be a pass or a fail, but distinction grades are attainable on the other components, and the overall assessment for the apprenticeship certificate will be graded as a pass or a distinction. Next slide, please. Currently in development is a bridging assessment. So, like Peter and Salim said earlier on, it will enable a transition for somebody that's gone through the domestic electrician apprenticeship will be able to move over to the installation electrician. So there'll be bridging units that will be able them to do that relatively straightforward. In development also is an experienced worker assessment. So more on that will be released as and when details are fully finalised. So please do check on the NET website, as we do have a range of materials to support the EPA that are already there. And of course, we are also in the process of developing specific additional materials for the domestic electrician. So thank you very much for that one, and I'll hand you over to Rob.
Thanks a lot, Bill. So I'm Rob Ballinger. I'm just going to take you through some of the latter slides on resources, basically. So things are still being finalised. This is very much, as David said, this is on its way webinar. We'll be running future webinars to give more detail around assessment, RPL, etc. But the handbook we're hoping to have finalised by the 1st September, and then evolved tests will be coming October time, with the practical material, the assignments, etc. September. And then we're going to have an assessor guide, you know, everything like we normally have for 5.3, 5.7, everything down there in one pack, so it's easy to use for centres. We are looking at RPL at the moment. I know there's been a couple of questions in the chat. So we will have an exemption document updated. So there's RPL from qualifications like 2365, 8202, and their obviously EAL equivalencies. That will be updated and put on the website. It is looking like there will be a bridging assignment from those at the moment. If somebody's, let's say, done a 2365, 8202 level 2 and level 3, we're looking potentially at a bridging assignment to then get them to the relevant stage of the domestic electrician. And we're working with the employer group at the moment to look at that. We've actually got a meeting later on this week to kick that off, and we're going to get that all agreed with EAL, etc. So looking at some of the resources on the next slide, we've got building services, digital credentials available for the domestic electrician. There will be, there's a link there on the slide which gives you the details of the building services credentials we've got already. Just a heads up on that, you will need to capture learners' personal email addresses and details and log them at the start of the qualification to enable you to collect that digital badge at the end. We've had issues where in the past, you know, college email addresses have been used and then expired, and so please use personal email addresses so they can keep that digital badge after the event. If we look at some of the other resources we've got on the next slide, so the book's already been updated. So anybody purchasing the latest HODA textbook, there is obviously, this is now covering the domestic electrician qualification as well. So as you can see there on the slide, it says incorporate new content from the brand new domestic electrician. So it's got to be a first for our partnership with HODA. We've got the book before we've got the qualification, because we were working in collaboration on that and we knew the qualification content was being produced. We made sure this round of book updates, we actually included the domestic electrician in there. So the book will already cover the content of the domestic electrician. So if you look at some of the more details on the book on the next slide, we've got a T-level book that covers the course. So for anybody doing T-levels, not really relevant to domestic electrician today, but just a quick heads up, the building services T-levels book is now available. And when you get the presentation through or downloaded from the handout section, there's a link on there where you can order the book. Anybody working with HODA previously and using Thomas Stotter's email address, you will now find you probably get out of office and it's now Jen covering that. So just some more details on the book on the next slide.
It appears that Rob's having some difficulty with his audio. Rob, are you there?
It must be the heat, David. I think the heat has got to Rob's broadband.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Rob. So we'll just mention the last couple of slides whilst you try and sort out your network connection. Just following on really from what Rob said, the Boost e-books are available for you to use and to purchase. There's an email address there, Gemma Simpson at HODA Education. If you can contact Gemma and tell them that you've been along to this webinar and got an update and you'd like to look at the books which are available, and please check those out, they're very helpful. So just a call really to stay in contact. Are you registered for the alerts? Hopefully most of you are, but it's worth always checking if you're not. Please follow that link on your screen or go to our website, and on the bottom you'll see a banner, and along the right hand side there's a link to register your details. To get updates on anything you want really, you'll just click electrical or BSc or various other things that interest you. If you've not been in there for a while and you registered a while ago, it's always worth going back in. You can always update your preferences. We're also all on LinkedIn, so please follow us on LinkedIn and connect with us. We have various different groups on there. So that's it. That's all the information. Thanks for staying with us whilst it's very hot and probably quite uncomfortable listening in. We appreciate your time. We'll just pause for a moment now while we look at the questions that have come through, and hopefully we'll get those answered. So please bear with us just a moment. Okay, well, I can see many of them have been answered by colleagues as we've been working through. There's a question here, I think, for Bill. The EPA requiring EICR, it was mentioned that this would have a light touch in the TC. Has there been an appropriate link with these two to confirm there will be no gaps in the students' requirements? Does that make sense, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, we will be doing a little bit of EICR work within the endpoint assessment, but it won't be, if you like, to the same extent as part and parcel of the qualification that normally goes out with it. So it's an appreciation.
Thank you, Bill. A follow-on question here. Will colleges have access to the online certification system so we're able to train learners? Well, with Sitting Girls, we have an e-cert, which can be claimed if you have DCS and when you're making the claim. And as Rob pointed out, we also have the digital credentials, which only require the learner's email address. But was that relating to yourself, Bill? And I think you mentioned that in part of your presentation.
Yeah, as part and parcel of the materials that are going to be available to apprentices and training providers, we will have blank forms and also a mechanism that they'll be able to, to actually input some data. So there'll be a similar system that will be available web-based, so that they can actually have a look at it. So it's nothing traumatic when they turn up to do the endpoint assessment.
Thank you very much, Bill. A question for Celine: can self-funded learners do the 539393 route?
So yeah, so there have been a number of questions around self-funded. So if you're talking about learners who are on a previous 2365 or 8202 and now wish to join this 5393 program as apprentices, then the answer is yes. I'm not sure if I understood when you just mean.
I think what we're looking at. I think the question is probably related to a non-apprentice, Salim. So are learners allowed to do it as a non-apprentice? I believe this qualification is for the apprenticeship only.
Yeah, correct. So this qualification is simply for apprentices going down the apprenticeship route.
Thank you, Salim. So just scrolling through. When does the JIB card for this qualification become available?
So,
to response, it'll be available by the time that learners are completing the apprenticeship. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So there will be a gold card, but it will be a domestic gold card that the ECS will have created, and there will be some communications from ECS JIB around this over the course of the next few weeks.
Thank you, Salim. Is Smart Screen available? We were just looking for an update earlier today from our Smart Screen publishing team. So we're aware that people are looking for that. We suspect there'll be a lot of crossover in content from the current qualification, so there may be just require some updates. So in terms of your own delivery, you'll have a lot of the information already through the current Smart Screen, but we'll get an update on anything that any dates and such like for any further information which may follow. When will there be a route for self-funded? Well, listed the self-funded systems at the moment would be the 2357. There's nothing designated for a domestic electrician currently. This is a brand new apprenticeship and only just been permitted quite recently, so it's still very brand new. There's no pipeline for a self-funded route as yet, as I'm aware of, but of course we'll speak with the industry and see if there may be one in future or what the demand might be. So it may be something we can pick up in the future. But for now, unless anyone else can correct me, I'm not aware of any alternative other than this apprenticeship. Surely the experienced worker route is not for apprentices. Why can this not be done by self-funded? Well, there is an experienced worker route at the moment, but it's not for the domestic electrician. There's a structured experienced worker route that exists at the moment. And so if your feedback is, you'd like to see a version of that for a domestic electrician, then we'll take that feedback to the industry. That experienced worker route was set up by various stakeholders, and be for them to listen to that feedback.
So just on that, just on that, David. So there is going to be, as Bill said, and I think I mentioned it earlier on, there is going to be a domestic electrician.
Oh, yeah. I was getting. You're right. I heard that. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, there is going to be a domestic electrician experience worker route. So at the moment, we currently have live an experience worker route, that's linked to our current 5357 qualification, So now we're going to be developing a domestic electrician experience worker route aligned to 5393, to this new standard. And this domestic electrician experience worker route will be coming out later on this year. In terms of prerequisites, experience, what this, what that, we don't know as yet, because we're still developing this and having discussions with the relevant industry bodies to find out what experience and prerequisites learners will need to have prior to coming onto this program. So, we don't really have any more information as of yet. So when we do, we'll be able to send you out future comms specifically around this. But hopefully it will come out later on this year, towards the latter part of this year at least anyway.
Thanks very much, Liam. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for jumping in there. I was getting, and that's perfectly correct. Is it possible to have some indication on the specific new technologies and the equipment that may be needed? I don't know if Peter can give us a slight more update, but we will look to do something again in a couple of months' time when we're a bit further on with the development of the rigs and the actual practical content. So we'll probably do a follow-up webinar in a couple of months' time. There'll be a lot more detail by then on that. Today's really about raising awareness about what's coming along, how it will be structured at high level. So hopefully it's giving you a guide and some insight into all that. And hopefully that's enough to get going, and then we will have further detail. Is there an experienced worker route? Then the apprenticeship route only isn't correct. Apologies for the confusion with that. Sliam's updated us that yes, it is in the pipeline, and it will be developed and it's being discussed. So details of which we may know more in a couple of months' time, but it's likely to take a few months, I would have thought. EV charging covered within the scope of the qual, and Sliam has answered yes, domestic EV is covered within this new standard. Okay, no more questions coming in. I'll give everyone just a moment to think of any other questions, or if there's something we've not covered correctly. It's about 2:15 now, so we're all on time for finishing, but we'll stay on a couple of moments if we haven't answered your questions correctly, if you'd like to ask them again, if you'd like any clarity, if you've got any queries or feedback for us, please do let us know. If there are no further questions in a few moments, we will close. I can see similarities between the knowledge units. Will it be made clear in September? So yeah, I suppose what you're looking at there is the tutors are getting ready for delivery, and you want to be aware of exactly what they're delivering. The handbook will be out very soon, and that will have the details of what's being delivered. So tutors will be able to see exactly what needs to be delivered. But there's so much crossover. There's enough, certainly, from the experience of delivering current qualifications to deliver the early parts of this qualification with health and safety and so on, whilst you get used to the slight changes that will come with the qualification. 103 unit is plain down 3-phase, but new house are having 3-phase built in them. So that's a bit of feedback, I guess. Do all the M2 centres have to offer this new EPA? Bill, is that a...
No, they don't have to if they don't want to, and there may well be the possibility that there'll be separate domestic centres as well.
Thank you. A question about EV charging. If it's covered in the 5393, will it RPL against a standalone EV domestic course, or will it need to? Do you know from your discussions in the development if it will be an equivalent to, and therefore learners would need to do it, or would they need to do it as an extra CPD?
We'd need to have a look at that, to be honest, and get back to everyone, maybe.
Yeah, that's no problem. We'll check the coverage across into the new EV charging domestic course, and if there's full coverage, then it may be that that can be directly RPL'd or simply accepted. If not, we'll look at what could be reduced on that. How do we deal with this in Wales? Well, this is an apprenticeship. There's new qualifications and apprenticeships in Wales, which are different to England. So whether there's an opportunity for the experienced worker routes, that may be potentially available. We can have some further discussions on that and make some checks. Need a technical cert for domestic electrician, followed by an MVQ bridging course once done in the centre. Well, at the moment, we're moving towards T-levels. We have the current VRQs and technicals, but we're moving towards T-levels. So the landscape for full-time learners is much different. You know, and it's changing all the time with government policy. And Peter's added, you know, as mentioned above, we've got the 8202 and the 2365 available. Yes, this seminar is recorded. You'll actually get a link to this in the follow-up automatically, so you can watch the recording again if you need to do so. Remember, there's a you can download a copy of the presentation by going into the handout section. So if you look at your column, there should be a place that says handouts. If you click on that, you can download it. If you go to that now and download it, because I'm not sure if the software allows you to do it following the presentation. A query here about the 239152 and the claiming of it following this qualification. I'm not sure if you covered that, Peter.
Yeah, sorry, I've just posted that one as well. Because with the domestic qualification, sorry, I'll start again. With the 5357, the inspection and test isn't just the knowledge section. It's also very much given based on the inspection and testing undertaken on site. We're not too sure at the moment whether there'll be an RPL for 2391 with this, because 2391 is very much three-phase, very much aimed at industrial type installations. So it's probably not, but it's something we're looking at.
Thank you very much, Peter. So I think we've come to a natural end there. I hope you found it helpful and valuable. Please stay in touch with us. There will be a little survey. If you've got any queries that you may think of following this, please email us. I'll drop it on the survey. Stay in touch with us, and hopefully we'll have more material and an update for you in September. But it's been great connecting with you all again. I hope you've found it valuable. Thank you to Bill, Peter, Rob and Celine for contributing to the presentation. Thank you very much, gents. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Have a great summer. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye.